Welcome to Behind the Line, where we pull back the curtain on the challenges facing first responders and frontline workers. The work you do is unique, and so are the stresses that go with it. Join me as we tackle key issues to reduce risks for burnout, and as we work to support you in doing the job you love without sacrificing being the kind of person you want to be. Hey there, and welcome back to Behind the Line. I'm Lindsay Foss. I'm a clinical counselor specializing in trauma therapy, and a wellness advocate and educator for first responders and frontline workers. Behind the Line is a place for us to talk about the real life behind the scenes challenges facing you on the front lines. I created this podcast with the hope of bringing easy access to skills for wellness, allowing you to find greater sustainability both on the job and off. I am so glad you're joining me today because I'm here with my best friend, Meredith. And we are going to talk about how frontline work impacts our families and how our families impact us in our work. Now, Meredith and I have actually known each other since first grade. We grew up down the street from one another, and I actually lived with her family for a short period of time at the end of high school. I asked Meredith to be on the show today because she has an incredibly unique vantage point that I'm so grateful she's willing to share. Meredith is a nurse of 13 years. She was raised in a home where her mom was a nurse and her dad was a paramedic. One of the running jokes as kids about Meredith's family was that whenever we did a school project that we put together at her house, it was always and only held together by medical tape. This was all they ever had in their stationery drawer. In her adult life, Meredith married a wonderful man who serves in the Canadian Armed Forces. Meredith has experience in being a child of frontline workers, the spouse of a frontline worker, and being herself a frontline worker. Meredith and her husband have 3 beautiful children and live in Western Canada. And today we're going to talk about her experiences of being impacted by the work and our collective thoughts on how to balance the cost of the work to a family with the protection a family offers through connection. Buckle up, you guys. This one is going to be so good. Welcome, Meredith, and thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited to talk with you today. So let's start out by talking about what it was like to be raised by 2 frontline workers. Tell us a little bit about what that looked like for you and your family growing up and some of the impacts that were there for you, good, bad, or otherwise.
First of all, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I'm really excited to chat about it. So, I'll just tell you a bit about my kind of nuclear family that I grew up with. So, my dad was a paramedic for the city of Calgary. And then my mom is a nurse and worked a variety of jobs, including like the emergency room, in oncology and hematology, in home care in a couple of different areas. So those were my parents. And then it was myself and my sister. And growing up with having 2 frontline workers, I feel very blessed because they did a really great job of protecting me and my sister from exposures and the hard kind of reality of what they face at work, which I'm learning as an adult. What goes into that with my children is lengthy. But it was also so advantageous for us. So an example of something like super fun that I remember is my dad, obviously being a paramedic, emergency planning is a huge asset. And
Right.
he goes out into homes and deals with the worst of the worst. And so he would run mock scenarios in our house of like crazy situations that we would have to plan our way out of. So fire drills late in the afternoon, early in the morning, my mom would lose it. My mom would lose it, but my dad would have all these elaborate plans. Same thing, like how are you going to get out of your window if it's frozen? And then how are you going to get down from this point? And who are you going to bring with you? And like, are you going to bring your pictures and your journal? No, you're not. Those kinds of things. But it was just really intentional, the care and attention that they went into in keeping us safe and protecting us from some of those issues. And I've learned a lot. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, it sounds like it was really well handled. Like, I think sometimes when that happens, it can feel, like, scary. It's kinda cool how they handled that in a way that it sounds like you interpreted as kind of fun and interesting.
I totally have, and it's taken me on a really hilarious journey in my career as well. But it was always kind of like a locked room situation. Like if you're ever going to a locked room, I'm definitely the person you want to have with you, for sure. um, that's kind of the approach that they've taught me to take in life is just like, where's your next clue? Where's your next clue? And
Yeah,
so that's been helpful, you know, to deal with emergencies and trauma and life and hardships. And like this year in pandemic, like, whoa, where's your next clue is an understatement. Um,
right.
but yeah, it was really great.
So, I'm curious about how being raised in that context factored into your decision to become a nurse.
Um, yeah, I kind of had a few different lenses play into me becoming a nurse. I'll just let the cat out of the bag that, like, Lindsay and I grew up together, which is so amazing. And so she was around with me when I had, like, some of my own health troubles, and so I spent a bit of time in the hospital as a kid. And then my mom, you know, would talk about her job and what she would do for families and for patients. And then my dad always made his job seem super exciting and super fun. So initially I wanted to be a paramedic, but my dad is very practical. And so it's not practical to be on the side of Deerfoot, our very big highway in Calgary in the winter. And you always want better for your kids. So he
Mhm.
encouraged me to go into nursing and kind of go that pathway. But the patient care aspect and kind of the planning that went into it was super interesting to me. So along with being a patient and being raised in that environment and having some grandparents that are first responders as well, it kind of was a no-brainer for me. I knew that's what I wanted to do, and that they would always say, "What's your plan B?" And I would say, "I don't operate with plan B." I do, for the record now, but at the time, stubborn teen, I did not. So yeah.
Fair. That's fair. No, it sounds like there was a lot of really fantastic things that you experienced about being raised in a frontline family. I'm curious if there were harder sides to that for you growing up.
Yes. But hindsight's always 2020, for sure. So I know now that my dad struggled a lot with PTSD and operational stress injuries at work. And I know
Mhm.
now the impact and heaviness that that played with him, kind of,
Right.
and how he was able to um, play out his career and some of the decisions he made. And my mom overcompensated for that. So she
Mm,
was always very concerned about our feelings and how we were interpreting um, essentially the hardships that they were facing. And so, yeah, that was just a little bit of a challenge for sure. My
okay.
dad's coming around now and having tremendous insight and um, having some great conversations about his work and how it affected him and things like that. But in the moment, it's very difficult to take off your blinders. So, one of the calls he went in on was um, a teenage kind of homicide situation. And coming home from
Mm,
work at the end of the day and then dealing with teenagers and trying to map out his life and make sense of that, he didn't have very great coping strategies for doing that.
right. Right. So what did that feel like for you then as a kid in that space to try to make sense of? Like, it sounds like there's a lot of ways that there were positive experiences of being in that context, but I also imagine that there would be some challenges that would arise when you aren't the adult in the space and you are interpreting them through the lens of being the kid, and maybe don't have all the context for like why dad is being a bit weird today, or why he seems a bit off.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious if there's insight for you into what that felt like to grow up in from the child's perspective.
I'm like, it's very interesting to reflect back on what you remember in your childhood versus how you piece it together now in adulthood. And
Totally.
like, from what I can remember and how I felt they were parenting me, and I'm sure if you interviewed them, this would sound very different, um, is just a huge emphasis on different strategies that allow you to cope. And despite them maybe not having them or being able to interpret them or utilize them to their full efficacy within our family, making sure that my sister and I, went for a walk every night and got some physical activity, got to connect with each other and with my parents, like dinner at the table. I know that's going by the wayside for many, but like such a huge time to connect and just let the weight of the world fly by around you. And
Mhm.
like all great parents, you kind of shelter from the hard. And
Yeah.
so you want to protect and keep, those barbed wires from the fence away from the little hearts that you're entrusted with. And so honestly, they did do a really great job, and they did take into account some necessary coping strategies to try and help us long term. And so my dad took a really practical lens of doing that. So he was the one that we did our driver's test with, and he was the one that we did our fire emergencies with. And my mom had a different lens, more centered around our spiritual health and our compassion care and our womanhood, basically.
Mm.
And so
So like a pretty well balanced kind of experience.
basically, I feel really lucky with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really great just to have them work as a team and
Mhm.
also be transparent when they were not working as a team.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Cool. Okay. So having been in that context and raised in the context of kind of knowing what the different pressures were for your family, and those experiences and your awareness of the impacts of being a frontline worker from a frontline worker home, did you feel better or differently equipped with what to anticipate when you started a family? And did you have some thoughts about how you might shape it differently than what you experienced?
I think like every kid had like my handful of 5 things that I will quote never do as a parent.
Right.
Yeah. So I definitely had those in my mind. And I also had a handful of things that I was never going to sacrifice in my parenting. And so I can give you some examples maybe.
Yeah, I'd love to hear them.
So I think my dad will forgive me. He's pretty transparent that alcohol was a good crutch for some of the
Mhm.
hardships that he experienced in his career and in his own life and childhood and things. And so, I can't even think of how where that kind of shape and miss went between us, but I took a hard line that that isn't a way that I want to utilize um, and cope in my life. I'm by no
Yeah,
means perfect and have lots of, skeletons in my closet and dirt under my rug, but that was just like one of my hard lines. Um,
right.
so we've had some conversations about that, and we try and keep that just out of our household and out of our coping toolbox.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, So that is one. And then one that has been really important to me is my spirituality and just um, being able to connect and trust and have faith that this world, there's more to it and that we are not here alone.
Mhm.
People typically have kind of a person or a creator or a something. I absolutely believe in God. And so, that's majorly been a huge factor in how I practice in my work and what
Mhm.
I try and promote in my family. And
Yeah.
again, like not perfect at all, like throwing stones at a glass house. I get it. Um,
Right.
but that's kind of where I've tried to focus and where I've found some relief and some coping strategies in the angst and the hardships of first responding and some of the things that you see and experience.
Hmm. Right. It's like something to anchor into in the midst of it.
It is. I was just actually talking to a coworker who's struggling, and um, it is like trying to find those places to sink yourself into and feel whole are
Yeah.
just transient. And you know, that 2020 lens is just such a big mirror of how strong and brave we all are in hard times, but also exposes the cracks and shows, you know, where we all live just under the surface and how hard life is
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
everyone. People that have it great, people that have money, people that don't have money, people with jobs, without jobs, with kids, without kids. Like, I feel like I know zero people that are unscathed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has been the year that just hit all of us. Um, I'm so I want to keep us moving, and I want to move into where things are now. So you were raised in this family, you had these experiences that shaped how you move into your own family system. You choose to be a frontline worker yourself, and then on top of that, you marry someone who's also on the front lines. And in some ways kind of replicate the frontline married couple dynamic that your parents had,
Mhm.
um, in their own unique way.
Mhm.
And I'm curious if there are ways that it's been helpful to be coupled with someone who is also in first response and frontline work, and if there are ways that it has surprised you.
There are all of the above. All of the above.
Okay.
There's, like, hindsight, there's, like, empathy for my parents, there is, like, a WTF aspect of what have I done, there's a, "Oh my gosh, I feel sorry for Matt," there's, like, all of it.
Right.
Oh, goodness, yeah. Um,
So tell us a little bit. Matt is your husband. You guys have been married for how long?
we just celebrated our 6th wedding anniversary on Thursday.
Congratulations,
Thank
6 years.
you.
That's crazy. And you
Yeah.
guys have 3 kids,
We do, yep. Max is 10, Mavi is 3, and Maya is 1.5.
and they are beautiful, beautiful kids.
They're wild, yep.
Uh-huh.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
Matt works for the armed forces.
He does. He, works for the Department of National Defense with the Canadian Armed Forces in, the Navy in Calgary here.
Okay. So, like, when you think about being connected with someone else who maybe gets aspects of what it is that you see in a day and you get aspects of what he sees in a day, does that feel helpful to you guys? Or are there ways that that's differently challenging?
I am so incredibly grateful for his lens and his ability to cope with me.
Hmm.
Like, so, so grateful. I am an empath that feels with every hair on my body, and, like, if not for Matt, our house would be full of babies that needed homes and furniture that needed out because people needed to flip their houses quickly, and our house would just be a disarray. Like, he is the
Mm.
hard line for sure.
He's the boundary setter.
I oddly enough, he's the boundary setter, but I'm the enforcer.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. 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 It's
Mm.
interesting. He one of the things, I think it was you and I that were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, but like one of my favorite pieces about us and about the idea of us, and it could happen with any couple, it doesn't just need to be first responder couples, but the
Mhm.
grace that we offer each other in regards to the hard days and the
Mm.
stressful things that we experience. Everyone has a different way to communicate, which is no secret.
Right.
And him and I utilize just a really simple, like, traffic light emoji, and we kind
Mhm.
of check in with each other daily to see where we're at in the traffic light. I also do that with a group of my really good friends to see how we're doing. And that just
Yeah.
allows you, without words, to position yourself and be the least amount of vulnerable, but still vulnerable, to say, this is a hard day or things are going great, and not miss each other in the wind. Because there's nothing worse than one person having the worst day as a first responder, coming home to someone who's had the best day, and you come
Mhm.
in and just like vomit your whole life on them, and
Right.
they come in and like are so cheerful and not ready to receive that information,
Right.
right?
Totally. Totally. I love that system. I like that it kind of bypasses the tendency to be like, "Hey, how are you? How you doing?" And we just chalk things up to fine, even though we're not fine. Like, it's such an autopilot answer that we don't even really consider how we're doing
Yeah.
before we're answering. Like, the words are coming out of our mouth before we've even thought it all the way through.
Yeah.
I like the light system. It feels like it kind of bypasses that.
And it feels like it's been easy to, spread out with the kids. It's a nice visual.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy to explain to other people. So it's not, you know, just this really complicated, like, matrix that we're scoring each other on. And it's
Right.
just
Totally.
a check in on your heart.
Right. It's kind of that, like, KISS principle, right? Like, the keep it simple, stupid.
Yep. Totally.
Like, simplifying things that are already complicated enough.
And there's so many hard things in a day. That's like one of the things I'm grieving right now, is just the fact that I could do something without thinking about it, and now everything has taken on a health lens,
Mhm.
a COVID lens, a 2020 lens, a, like, whose needs does this impact greatly? Like, can I
Yeah.
do this safely? All of that. Being
Right.
able to utilize that system is just easy.
So kinda connecting to that, like, my next question was, what are some of the things you worry about for your family and the impact you're concerned about as your family continues to exist in this frontline space together? And as a tag on to that, what I wondered about was, are there additional concerns given COVID risks right now, as you and Matt are both out there and working, and coming home to your family of 3 kids?
So I will be transparent and say, like, frontline is a subjective interpretation. So neither Matt or I are exposed to COVID at this time in our roles.
Okay.
So that's taken some pressure off for now. We're not doing great here in Alberta if you're a stats math person. So we are ramping up some big plans in the future. And
Mm.
Matt and I have started to engage in conversation, things like family planning and care for the kids. And if we both did have to go um, and do very frontline stuff, right now we're able to keep our family sheltered, and honestly I feel so incredibly lucky. We even have the capability for some of the time to work from home, And so it's actually been an asset for our kids. They've had lots more
Yeah.
FaceTime. From like a mom's heart perspective, the laundry's getting done. So that's just filling me up.
Like bonus.
The benefits from working from home.
Totally.
But there's definitely been conversations about kind of what things will look like. And honestly, I don't know if I have a great answer in the looking glass for that. I don't really know how to anticipate like the stress that the kids will be exposed to. Yeah, I don't know. Part of my job is dealing with children with complex medical needs. And so that's stressful because parents are getting their like supports that they've built up stripped from them. And
Right.
so doing a lot of project work with that and with the school board and things like that.
Hmm.
But honestly, just in our family, working on resiliency techniques. Seriously, just trying to
Okay.
stay afloat and pivot is the motto. Plot twist is like the
Yes.
plot twist. We yell
Right.
out in the house, like, didn't see that coming. Yeah.
Uh, I love that. I like that you brought up the word resilience because part of what I wonder about is what some of the things are that you and your husband actively try to do as parents to buffer the impact of both your work, but also, I mean, it has been this 2020 pandemic year. So just like the hardness of the world sometimes, like what kinds of things do you guys actively do to try to buffer for your kids what some of that feels like?
Um, Trying to keep things normal for them, and I know normal is like the most ambiguous term ever, but trying to keep like daily routines
Mm,
is pretty important for all of us. And like the more we strayed from them, the more we realized how much we need them.
mhm.
So my kids are in day home and my eldest attends school.
Okay.
Um, and we've carried on with that. We have included my parents in our cohort for everyone's mental health. And I know that's just a really hard thing to evaluate for everyone. So everyone
Mhm.
has their own places of comfort, but that's where ours sits. And,
Yeah.
you know, I joke with people because in February I had attended all of the online classes to try and get my 10-year-old off screens. I was
Mm,
like drinking the Kool-Aid, which I still believe that, you know, they spend a lot of times on screens and it's hard to get them off.
mhm.
And then March, it was just like, here's your whole life on your computer. I love you.
Right. I hope we all
Mm,
survive.
yeah, exactly. So we've been doing a lot of family drives, a lot of mountain hikes, a lot of new traditions inside, crafting,
Hmm.
those kinds of things. Potty training. Come on, I did potty training.
Oh,
I should not leave that out. 2020's been kind
potty
to
training
me.
and COVID, goodness.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally.
So,
So there's like some really great ways it sounds like you guys have continued to work at that. I love the routine building pieces because you're right. Those are like, again, what anchor our brains to like what feels okay and normal. So, we've been talking about how you buffer your family from some of the impacts by keeping routines and maintaining these pieces. What are some of the ways that your family buffers the impact of the work on you? Like, are there specific ways that you lean into some of the things that are your family's things that feel like they act as like protective factors?
this is just like a shameless plug for my OCD, which isn't necessarily a healthy habit, but I don't know if you've ever heard of Go Clean Co. online on Instagram.
Okay.
And they have like essentially it's like these cleaning clips that are just so therapeutic to me in my soul. And
Hmm.
so one of my like healthy unhealthy things that I do at home that my family is well aware of and have called me on is I clean. Like
This is the coping.
anxiety clean, I call it. So, if my tub is sparkling, people come over and they're like, "Oh, you're having troubles, hey?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I am. You're welcome.
Mm.
Please enjoy the smell of pine."
Welcome to my home. Yes,
Mhm.
totally,
Um,
totally.
my kids, honestly, probably the same as yours and a lot of other people, are the intuitive empaths. So, um, you know, in conjunction with me totally aligning myself with, God's plan and a way that is being shown to me, my kids totally, pick up on the sadness, make you laugh. I am totally vulnerable in the fact that like if I'm a puddle on the floor, my kids will see it. They will
Mm,
learn from that and know that you um can be weak and brave all at the same time. And
totally.
so we have big conversations about that. Matt is honestly just the greatest sounding board and the most intuitive person to me falling apart, which I mean
Mm,
is a crappy job for him, but I will tote the same of me being able to, you know, see him for who he is and what he
mhm,
does. So that's just like such a huge blessing to be called out on my crap and to be lifted up in it at the same time.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
then, yeah, like I know that you don't have 10-year-olds yet, Linz, but
yeah.
just like a 10-year-old boy is like an actual slice of heaven. They like still love
Hmm.
their moms, but are like their own people and make their own jokes and have their own hilarity and lens of the world. And so
Mm,
we in our home we have humans and we have best friends and relationships and friendships and things that happen right in our walls, which is so therapeutic.
yeah, that's very cool. It sounds like there's like a deep connection to the time that you guys have together, which is really fantastic. I also think it can be a little bit unique for families who do frontline work because I think um, a lot of the struggle that happens over time, if a frontline worker isn't doing their own wellness work and they're like bordering into burnout and they're struggling with resilience, is to feel increasingly disconnected, even in those spaces where we're like all in the same room, but really all we're doing is sharing the same air. We're not really like connected.
Totally.
It sounds like you guys have found some really concrete ways of creating those solid connections.
I think we've really tried to be mindful of that as well. Um, I can say wholeheartedly that from my childhood, my parents passed off shifts. And so their time together, they made a lot of sacrifices for us to be out of care. Um,
Mhm.
Bless them. I'm sure
Yeah.
it was a little easier on the budget as well.
Mhm.
I'm sure there was lots of reasons, but they definitely made that sacrifice in the time that they had together to keep the wheels on the bus and keep the household running. And
Mhm.
so, um, from you know Gary Chapman's Five Love Languages is a book that like I preach religiously with Matt and I, and
Mhm.
he is quality time. And
Yeah.
so we try and make an effort to honor that with him. He is an introvert and the people that he does need, he needs. And I mean, we have different perspectives on how many people that is. I am an
Right.
extrovert, so my circle could include 50 people.
Yeah.
But yeah, we try really hard to kind of keep everyone's hearts guarded with that.
Well, and like to be able to see each other, like to know what, if we're using the framework of love languages, which is, I think, a helpful framework in terms of having common language around it, that to be able to like step back and really see each other for what our love language is and how we pour into that intentionally instead of just like hoping that something sticks is pretty fantastic.
Yeah. It's just, you know, it's hard in relationships to speak words out loud and feel like you're being very, very clear and very, very explicit and still not have the resolution of being heard. It's just so defeating. And
Totally.
so, um, the level of 5 love languages, oh my gosh, 5 love languages has been like a prescription and a necessity for us to be able to not miss each other in regards to our needs that way.
That's fantastic. I love that resource plug because I think that resources like that are super valuable. And that's one of the books I love most. And I will try to link to that in the show notes when this recording is done, because I think that's super valuable. One of the things that I find in my work with first responders is that interactions with families tend to look a little different. And I think it often depends on how much energy and effort they've poured into their own wellness work. Like if they're seeking counseling or other supports to kind of bolster their wellness, they tend to be able to do some of these things better than others who are struggling more to be connected. So there's like kind of 4 ways that I tend to see people being with their families. And unfortunately, some of them benefit their families and them more than others. So the first one would be being more like a bystander, where we as a parent or as a person in a household are present in body, but are not really connected or involved. We're like disconnected and numb, not present and tuned out. So we're like breathing the same air, but we're not really there. The next version of this is being more like a witness, where we're present and we're connected, but as an observer. So we're able to feel in connection to what's being witnessed, but we're not like in on the action with those who are involved. And by and large, when I see people who are more into burnout, that is more where they're spending their time. And it's a bit of a challenge because it is a bit of a detriment to their family, but it's also a detriment to them. Like they're not able to really like glean the fullness of what their family offers them as protection against some of the hardship of being on the front lines. The next piece is being a participant, which is where you're like in on the action, but others are leading it. So like when your kids come up and say, "Hey, come play," to be able to choose to say yes, even though you may not feel like saying yes, but allowing that to be an opportunity to like bridge into their world, because it lets us feel present and connected and interactive with the action. And it actually lets us feel more of the protective factors that our family offers us. And the last one is instigator. So this is to be like someone who's initiating and creating and leading and prompting others to participate. In our house, this happens when my husband randomly sneaks around a corner and yells ninja fight, and everyone bursts into a ninja fight. And it's fantastic. And everyone like soaks in like the laughter and the ridiculousness of every single moment of that. I'm curious what you think about that. Like, it sounds like you and Matt have worked really hard at leaning more into kind of that participant or instigator piece where you're quite intentional about your time with your kids.
So having that framework and those words are helpful and also a really great mirror. So I would say that you might be correct that some of the specific instances in our routine, I've intentionally carved out to be the instigator, and I've intentionally carved out Matt to be the instigator.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of times where I am I think the first one was bystander, right?
Yep.
Just like hearing the mayhem, but not necessarily involved. And that might
Mhm.
actually be the bigger impact that, my work and my life and how I interact with people is having on my kids is the fact that, it's hard to set boundaries when your work comes home with you. And it's hard
Totally.
to, leave people in crisis or, not answer questions when you're the person and when you like being the helper or the hero,
Totally.
which,
Totally.
yeah, is probably me for sure.
Well, and
Um,
are like equal parts addictive, but also exhausting.
and like
Yeah.
you don't necessarily notice when it bleeds onto other people in your life, right? You kind of just like
Mhm.
selflessly feel that you can take this on and you have
Right.
capacity without acknowledging that maybe other people's capacity is tied to yours or
Mhm.
tethered might be a better word, and
Yeah.
how your decision making in regards to boundaries and interactions can affect kind of your safe space at home when it's all blurred.
Totally. Well, and I think that there's like topics that for sure feel important to come back to in future shows in terms of like what it looks like to maybe set different boundaries or clear boundaries with ourselves or others around our helping so that we can maybe differently protect some of those pieces. But I think it's also a bit reflective of who we are, right? That we are helpers at heart. We all get into this kind of work because we want to make a difference.
Mhm.
Um, and it is hard to set that down, even if we know it's maybe good for us to set it down sometimes.
Right. Ooh, that's just, yeah. You're just
Amen. Yeah.
speaking my truth here, woman. Like, who will do the work if we don't do it, Lindsay? Who?
Oh, I know, right?
Yeah.
I know. There's this word you used about your marriage with Matt, where you said, we just have a lot of grace for each other. And I feel like grace is like just the most needed word in the world. Because I think there's, of course, grace within your marriage as you kind of get each other's day or the hardness that might have happened in the day. But there's also this like need to extend grace to ourselves that like we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can with what we know. We don't know all the things. And like for those listening who maybe do spend more time in bystander or witness mode, who are hearing that and feeling like shame that they're not doing it better, this is
No,
not what this is about.
no.
We're just trying to give language to what's happening for you so that we can also then help be more conscientious and intentional about what we're choosing in given moments, right? So that we can
Mhm.
be differently actively engaged in the process of our lives instead of just like hoping it all comes out in the wash.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, like, all of these lessons have tremendous learning and tremendous impact attached to them, and it's, easy to condense into a nice edited envelope of
Mhm.
content. But I mean, if you one of my favorite sociology references was my professor saying if you could do a bird's eye view of our city and take off everyone's roofs of their homes, what would you actually see? And so
Hmm.
it's just so easy to say, we have good family walks and we do these things. It's just so much harder to put into practice, but it is what we are intentionally trying to do to stay well during these difficult
Yeah,
times.
totally.
Hmm.
Totally.
Yeah.
Meredith, thank you so much for talking to me today, for sharing with all of us. I really appreciate it. And I'm very sure that our listeners are going to super appreciate this as well. I'm just going to wrap up by saying, just as a reminder to all of you listening, that you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram to get show updates. You can subscribe or sign up on our website to get emails with weekly updates from the show and with additional tools and resources. I'll include the link to the 5 love languages resource that we talked about during today's show, because I think that's super important and helpful. I've included all of the links and details in the show notes as well, so check them out. We really want to support you and your families in having the work you do be a meaningful part of your life without it overtaking you. I hope you'll double down this coming week, especially as we move into the holiday season, in intentionally participating and maybe even instigating some silly, lighthearted, and memory making moments with your family. Until next time, stay safe.